Hey everybody, today's lesson is on fractions and decimals. So two things that we've been learning about already this year is we've just been studying fractions, but earlier in the year we also studied decimals. What we're going to be doing today is taking things that are in fraction form, such as a fraction, like 1/2, and we're going to be changing them into decimals, like 0.5. Okay? We also want to be able to take a decimal, so if I start with the 0.5, I want to be able to change it back into a fraction. So that's really what we're working on today, changing them back and forth. Fractions and decimals are really partners, meaning they go hand in hand. So if I have one form of a fraction, I should be able to change it to a decimal, and if I have a decimal form, I should be able to change it back to a fraction. So first thing I want to talk about here, I'm going to clear my ink, and I want to start with just some basic fractions and decimals that I think everybody should be able to know. These are ones that either you know already, or if you don't know them, I think you need to memorize, because these are fractions and decimals that show up in real life all the time. So the first one I'm going to start with is one that I know that we all know. It's going to be the fraction 1/2. Okay? And if we were to do this, 1/2 is one that we should all know is going to be 0.5. Okay? So I'm giving you permission, if on any assignment you see the fraction 1/2 and we need to make it a decimal, just go ahead and change it over to 0.5. No work needed. Okay, a couple other ones. So just like 1/2 equals 0.5, there's a couple other ones that I think we should know. And these are our quarters. Okay, so we have 1/4, which I'm going to write over here, and I'll show you why in just a second. 1/4 and 3/4. Okay, so quarters are also our fourths. So one way to say this, 1/4 is also known as 1/4. Okay. And think about how much a quarter is. A quarter is 25 cents, so we can say that is 0.25. Okay? 3/4. Well, that means that this is 3/4. And 3/4, if you think about money, is how much? It equals 0.75. Okay? So we have our half, which is 0.5. We have our quarters, 1/4, which is 0.25, and 3/4. 3/4, which is 0.75, and then I believe that there are two others that I think we should have memorized. And these are our repeating decimals. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to change colors and just write these down below just a little bit. Actually, I'll write it right here. Our repeating decimals are this ones. Okay, there are thirds, 1/3 and 2/3. Okay, and what we need to know about repeating, these are going to end up repeating numbers. 1/3 because it's the smaller of the two, meaning compared to 2/3. 1/3 is going to be our 0.3 repeating, and 2/3, if I just double it, because 2/3 is actually double as 1/3, is going to be our 0.6 repeating. I'm going to write 0.66. I don't really have to. I can just write 0.6 repeating. Okay, but those are the 5 fractions that I think we should know. Okay, and again, I'm going to write this, and the reason I wrote them this way is for a specific reason. Okay, the 1/4, the 1/3, the 1/2, the 2/3, the 3/4, because if you look at their decimals, I have them going from least to greatest. 0.25, then 0.33, 0.5, 0.66, and then 0.75. So if I were to arrange these least to greatest, I'd get 1/4, then 1/3, then 1/2, then 2/3, and then finally 3/4. Again, these 5 fractions I think are fractions that every student should know, every person should know, because these are ones that show up all the time in the real world. Okay, so if we have these memorized, it's really going to show you a lot, save you a lot of work. Example 1, write each fraction as a decimal. So if you have fractions like this that clearly are not ones that we're supposed to know, and they're asking us to change it from being a fraction into being a decimal, well, that's what I'm about to show you what to do. So what we know is on any fraction, that fraction bar means to divide. Okay? Well, I can do this, and this is no different than dividing numbers and getting a decimal as an answer. Okay, so I'm going to long divide. So here's my little box. Remember, when I say the fraction here, 7/20, I say the 7 first. The number you say first always goes inside the box, so the 7 goes inside, the 20 goes outside. Now I know that 20 doesn't go into 7, so what I have to do is, instead of 7, I have to make it 7.0, and I bring that decimal point here straight up into my answer, and then I leave it. I'm done with the decimal. But now I can say, how many times does 20 go into 70? Well, it goes in there 3 times. 3 times 20 is going to be 60. I subtract, end up getting 10 left over. Well, I'm not done yet. Okay, if we're getting decimals, I can't stop until we have no remainders left. So I have a 0, I bring that down. 20 goes into 100 exactly 5 times, because 5 times 20 is 100, and I get nothing left over. So my final answer here is 0.35. Okay, 0.35. The next one, 3 and 5/8. Okay, well, the first thing I'm going to say is this. We should all recognize that the 3 here is our whole number. So it's 3 and something. Okay, 3 and something here, where the 5/8 is our something. Okay, the whole numbers are 3. So when I write my answer, it's going to be 3 point, again, something. I just have to figure out what that something is. So the whole number I'm not going to do anything with. That's just going to come down to my answer. And now the 5/8 here is just like I did with the 7/20. I'm going to take 5/8 and I'm going to divide it here. So when I say 5/8, the 5 is what I say first. So that goes inside the box. Then the 8 is going to be outside. I know 8 doesn't go into 5, so I'm going to add my 0.0. I'm going to bring my decimal point up. Okay, 8 goes into 50 6 times. 6 times 8 is 48. I get 2 left over. Add a 0, bring it down. 8 goes into 20 twice. 2 times 8 is 16. I get 4 left over, so I'm still not done. Add a 0, bring it down. 8 goes into 45 times, because 5 times 8 is 40, which gives me 0 left over. That's when I know I'm done. So this fraction part here, the 5/8, okay, that became this decimal, the 0.625. And then now let's not forget, we already brought our whole number down. I just have to take that decimal and bring it on to the end here. So that 0.625, I already have 3 points. I have to add on the 625. So the final answer is 3.625. Now the one thing I'm going to say here is these two answers, the 0.35 and the 3.625, these are what we call terminating decimals. Because terminating decimals are decimals where the number eventually just stops. Okay, it doesn't keep going and going and going forever. It's 0.625, it ends. It's 0.35, it ends, because that's what it means to terminate. It means something ends or something stops. Okay? Here we go. This is exactly what I just said. Terminating decimals, because the decimals stop or end. Examples are the two that we just had written down, like 0.35 and something like 3.625, because the decimal part finally just stops here. It doesn't keep going. It stops. There's nothing more there. Repeating decimals, now we've even done some of these. Repeating decimals are ones that keep going on and on and on forever. So I'm going to write down some examples here. If we're to divide, and we start getting this, where I see that this 4 is just going to keep going and going and going, I'm going to put dot, 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 meaning it keeps going. Well, there's a special way to write that. Okay? I can take this, and I could use all the numbers here and just put this repeating bar over the top. All right? That's the same thing as, well, what if I didn't put all of them? What if I just used 2 of them? That's okay too. But actually, eventually, we want it to be as simple as possible. Just the 0.4 repeating means that it's going to be 4, 4, 4, 4 over and over and over again. Let's write another one down here. Okay? 3.05, 05, 05. If I wanted to write in dot, 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 because it's got to keep going, going, going. So what if there's more than one number that repeats? If it's 05, 05, 05. Well, I write down 3.05. Now the bar does not go over everything because the whole thing doesn't repeat. The bar only goes over the part that repeats here, the 05. Okay, one last one. What if I did this? 3.1212 dot, dot, dot. And I see some people do this. Don't make this mistake. I see people write this down. 3.121. Okay, now are those numbers that are in the thing? Yeah, absolutely. But that's not the part that repeats, because if I wrote this out, this would mean it'd go 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 1, and now I have these two ones next to each other, which is not part of the number. So I'm going to back way up here because this is incorrect. If I'm going to write this as a repeating number, it's the 1, 2 that repeats. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. So I write this as 3.12, where the 1, 2 is what repeats. So we got terminating decimals if they stop, repeating decimals if the same number or a couple numbers repeat over and over and over again without end. All right, try this one on your own. Same thing that we just did in example 1. We're going to change the fraction to our decimal, but this time it's an improper fraction. So go ahead, pause the video, try it on your own. Okay, you're back. 5/3, just like always, the fraction bar means divide. The first number, the top one, always goes inside the box. The 3 goes on the outside. 3 does go into 5 one time, so I can do that. 1 times 3 is 3. I get 2 left over. Now I'm not done, so I have to add my 0.0. The decimal point comes straight up. Now the 0 comes down. 3 goes into 20 6 times. That's 18. I get 2 left over. Add a 0. Bring it down. 3 goes into 20 6 times. 6 times 3 is 18. I get 2 left over. Add a 0. Bring it down. 3 goes into 20 6 times. And what you notice here is that the same pattern keeps repeating, repeating, repeating. So as soon as I notice the repeat, I can stop. Let's put our repeating bar on there. 1.6 repeating is our final answer. Okay, last example. So most of the lesson was just changing fractions into decimals. What if we go the other way? What if we already have the decimal, and then they're asking me to change it back? They're saying start with a decimal, change it into a fraction, and of course always they're going to say put it in simplest form. Now, I'm going to do part A for you here. Okay, 0.85. Now, I'm going to admit, I say this wrong all the time. You're really not supposed to say it as 0.85. What we really need to know is, well, the first decimal place is the tenths place, and the second decimal place is the hundredths place, so that's something that we all know. So what I really should say is, instead of 0.85, the correct way to say this is 85 hundredths, because you're saying it by the final decimal place. Well, if it's 85 hundredths, then think about what that means as a fraction. It means 85 hundredths. So we're simply going to, instead of speaking it as 85 hundredths, we're going to write it down as a fraction 85 hundredths. And then just like always, always, we want to put this in simplest form. So let's go ahead here. I notice they both end in 5 and 0, so I'm going to divide by 5, which is going to end up giving me 17 in the numerator, 20 in the denominator. So always simplify for your final answer. If you want to pause the video and try part B on your own, go right ahead. I'm going to give you a clue though. This whole number is a 4. I know in my final answer it's going to be 4, and all I have to do is figure out the fraction part. This decimal 0.125 is going to give me the fraction. Okay? Pause the video, try that on your own. Okay, you're back. So instead of saying 0.125, I know that this is the tenths, the 2 is in the hundredths, the 5 is in the thousandths, so 0.125 is really 125 thousandths. Okay, and then because I know they both end in 5 or 0, I'm going to go ahead and divide these so I can reduce it. I'm going to divide by 5, which is going to end up giving me 25 over 200. Okay, I know I can divide those by, well, let's divide by 5 again. That's going to give me, I'm going to switch over here now. That's going to give me 5 over 40. Divide those by 5 again, which is going to give me finally 1/8. So that decimal 0.125 became 1/8, along with the whole number we already had, which is 4. Final answer, 4 1/8. So I hope you got that and that you understand the lesson.